Pro-A turned my property into theme park, but discovered I own the city's power company. The perfect storm begins. Welcome back to Hoey Tales, where entitled neighbors meet their match. Today's story comes from Sarah in Colorado. And trust me, this one's going to blow your mind. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we're about to dive into the most outrageous HOA revenge story you've ever heard. Sarah inherited a beautiful 15-acre property from her grandmother, complete with rolling hills, a pristine lake, and century-old oak trees. It was her sanctuary, her slice of heaven. But what she didn't know was that her new neighbors had plans, big, expensive, and completely illegal plans. You see, the Willowbrook HOA had been eyeing Sarah's land for months. They'd already convinced themselves that her property would make the perfect location for their community enhancement project, a theme park that would supposedly increase everyone's property values. The only problem? They forgot to ask Sarah's permission or get any legal permits, or, actually own the land they were planning to develop. But Sarah wasn't your average property owner. She had a secret that would turn this entire situation on its head. A secret so powerful that when the HOA finally discovered it, they'd wish they'd never heard of theme parks. When bulldozers rolled in uninvited, Sarah first noticed something was wrong on a Tuesday morning in June. She was enjoying her coffee on the back porch when she heard it, the unmistakable roar of heavy machinery. At first, she thought maybe the city was doing road work, but as the noise got louder and closer, she realized the sound was coming from her own property. Racing to her front yard, Sarah couldn't believe her eyes. 3 bulldozers were already past her gate, her locked gate, and were heading straight for her prize-winning rose garden. Behind them followed a convoy of cement trucks, excavators, and what appeared to be half the construction crews in Colorado. "Excuse me," Sarah shouted, running toward the nearest bulldozer. "What are you doing on my property?" The bulldozer operator, a burly man named Chuck, shut off his engine and climbed down. "Ma'am, we're here on orders from the Willowbrook HOA. We're building the new Willowbrook Wonder World theme park. Don't worry, we'll work around your house." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Work around my house? This is my land. You can't just build a theme park here." Chuck pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "Says here we got full authorization from the HOA board. They said you were, what's the word? Cooperative with the community improvement project." "Cooperative? I've never even spoken to the HOA board. Get off my property right now." But Chuck just shrugged. "Sorry, lady. Got my orders. Take it up with the HOA president, Karen Williamson. We got work to do." And with that, he climbed back into his bulldozer and started it up again. Sarah watched in horror as her beautiful rose garden, the one her grandmother had tended for 40 years, disappeared under the machine's massive treads. The HOA president reveals her master plan. Furious and desperate, Sarah marched straight to Karen Williamson's house. Karen lived in the largest house in Willowbrook, a gaudy mansion that looked like it belonged in a reality TV show about people with more money than taste. Karen answered the door with a smug smile, as if she'd been expecting Sarah. She was exactly what you'd picture when you think entitled HOA president. Perfectly manicured nails, designer clothes, and an expression that suggested she'd never heard the word no in her entire life. "Oh, Sarah, how wonderful to finally meet you properly," Karen said with fake sweetness. I trust you've seen the construction crews. Exciting times ahead. Exciting? Sarah sputtered. They're destroying my property. You have no right to build anything on my land. Karen's smile grew wider. Actually, sweetie, we do. You see, your property has been designated as Community Enhancement Space under the new HOA bylaws. We voted on it last month, unanimously, I might add. I'm not even a member of your HOA. Oh, but you are now. We've updated the community boundaries to include your little cottage. Don't worry, we'll grandfather you in at the low rate of just $800 per month in HOA fees. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. $800? For what? For the privilege of living next to Willowbrook Wonderworld, of course. We're building a state-of-the-art theme park that will feature a roller coaster, water slides, a petting zoo, and a food court. Property values are going to skyrocket. On my land. Karen waved her hand dismissively. Details. Details. The point is, everyone in Willowbrook will benefit. Well, everyone except you, I suppose. Your little house will have to go, obviously. Can't have residential property in the middle of a theme park. But don't worry, we'll give you fair market value. I'm thinking $50,000 should cover it. Sarah's blood pressure was reaching dangerous levels. Her property was worth at least $2 million, and Karen knew it. 50,000? Are you insane? Supply and demand, sweetie. With all the construction noise and disruption, who's going to want to buy a house in the middle of a construction zone? We're actually doing you a favor. That's when Sarah realized this wasn't just about building a theme park. This was a coordinated effort to steal her land for pennies on the dollar. And Karen's next words confirmed her worst suspicions. Oh, and Sarah, the city inspector will be by tomorrow to condemn your house. Something about safety violations and unpermitted structures. Terrible shame, really. But once the house is gone, we'll have room for the Tunnel of Love ride. The kids will absolutely adore it. The construction nightmare escalates. Over the next week, Sarah's peaceful property turned into an industrial war zone. The construction crews worked from sunrise to sunset, completely ignoring her protests. They built a massive parking lot where her vegetable garden used to be. They installed the foundation for a roller coaster right through her grandmother's prized oak grove. They even started construction on a massive Ferris wheel that would tower over her house like some kind of mechanical vulture. The noise was unbearable. The dust made it impossible to keep her windows open. The vibrations from the pile drivers cracked her foundation and shattered her grandmother's antique china collection. But the worst part was the complete disregard for her property rights. When Sarah called the police, they told her it was a civil matter and suggested she contact a lawyer. When she called the city, they said the HOA had filed all the proper permits and there was nothing they could do. When she called the construction company directly, they hung up on her. The theme park was taking shape with alarming speed. The roller coaster's steel skeleton was already 3 stories high. The water slide towers looked like something out of a dystopian nightmare. And right in the middle of it all sat Sarah's little house, looking more out of place by the day. But Sarah wasn't giving up. She had a plan, and more importantly, she had a secret that would bring this entire operation crashing down. The secret weapon is revealed. You see, Sarah had been keeping something from her neighbors, something that would change everything. While they saw her as just another homeowner to bulldoze over, Sarah was actually the majority shareholder and CEO of Mountain Peak Energy, the company that supplied electricity to the entire region, including every single home in Willowbrook. Sarah had inherited the company from her grandfather and had spent the last 15 years building it into a powerhouse that controlled the electrical grid for 3 counties. She kept a low profile, preferring to let her executives handle the day-to-day operations while she enjoyed her quiet life on the family property. But now, her neighbors had made it personal. The morning of the theme park's scheduled soft opening. Yes, they were planning to start operating rides on her property without her permission. Sarah put her plan into action at exactly 6 a.m., just as the construction crews were arriving for another day of destroying her land. Sarah made a phone call to her head of operations. "Tom, this is Sarah. I need you to implement Protocol 7 for the Willowbrook subdivision." Protocol 7? Tom sounded confused. "But ma'am, that's for customers who haven't paid their bills in 6 months. The Willowbrook HOA is current on all payments." "Not anymore, they're not. As of this morning, the entire subdivision is 6 months behind on their power bills." "But Sarah, that's not—" "Tom, trust me on this one, and make sure the disconnection notices are delivered personally. I want them to understand this isn't a mistake." The power play begins. At 8 a.m. sharp, Mountain Peak Energy trucks began rolling through Willowbrook. One by one, every house in the subdivision lost power. Not rolling blackouts or temporary outages. Complete electrical disconnection, the kind that required a technician to physically remove the meter and seal the connection. The theme park construction site went dark too. The massive construction equipment sat silent. The partially completed rides looked like abandoned skeletons against the morning sky. Sarah sat on her porch, sipping coffee and watching the chaos unfold. Her house, of course, still had power. Mountain Peak Energy had installed a private line for the CEO's residence years ago. The first person to figure out what was happening was Karen Williamson. She came storming across the construction site, her usually perfect hair disheveled, still in her silk pajamas. "Sarah, what did you do? The power is out everywhere." "Is it?" Sarah said innocently. "How strange. Mine seems to be working fine. Don't play games with me. I know you're behind this somehow." "Me? I'm just a simple homeowner, remember? Someone whose property you've been destroying for the past 2 weeks." Karen's face was turning red. "Fix this right now. Do you have any idea how much money we're losing every hour this construction site is shut down?" "Oh, I have a very good idea. I'd estimate about $50,000 per day in equipment rental alone, plus labor costs, plus the penalty clauses in your contractor agreements for delays. But hey, what do I know? I'm just someone whose house you're trying to steal for $50,000. That's when Karen noticed the Mountain Peak Energy trucks parked throughout the neighborhood, and the technicians in their distinctive uniforms, and the official-looking paperwork they were carrying. What? What are those trucks doing here?" Sarah smiled. "Well, it seems there's been some confusion about the power bills. The entire Willowbrook HOA account is showing as delinquent. Funny thing about power companies, they don't like it when customers don't pay their bills." The truth comes out, Karen's face went through several interesting color changes as the implications hit her. You work for the power company? Work for them? Oh, Karen, that's adorable. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Karen the Mountain Peak Energy website. Right there on the About Us page was Sarah's photo, with the caption, CEO and majority shareholder, Sarah Patterson. Karen's knees actually buckled. She had to grab onto the porch railing to keep from falling over. You're the owner of Mountain Peak Energy? Guilty as charged. Inherited it from my grandfather. Grew it into the largest utility company in the region. We provide power to over 200,000 customers across 3 counties, including, until this morning, every single house in your precious little subdivision. The color drained completely from Karen's face. But you live in such a small house. You dress so normally. You don't have a mansion or fancy cars or, unlike some people, I don't feel the need to compensate for my insecurities with ostentatious displays of wealth. I like my grandmother's house. I like my simple life. Or at least, I did, until you decided to turn my property into your personal amusement park. Karen was hyperventilating now. Sarah, please. We can work this out. We can move the theme park somewhere else. We can... Oh, I'm sure we can work something out. After all, I'm a reasonable businesswoman. But first, let's talk about those HOA fees you mentioned. $800 a month, wasn't it? We can waive those completely, forever. And the fair market value you wanted to pay for my house? $50,000, right? Karen's voice was barely a whisper. We can pay full market value. Whatever you think is fair. Whatever I think is fair. How generous of you to offer to pay me fairly for my own property. But you know what? I'm not interested in selling anymore. I've grown rather attached to the place, especially now that it has such interesting landscaping. The neighborhood meltdown word spread quickly through Willowbrook that their mysterious neighbor was actually the person who controlled their electricity and their natural gas. And as they were about to discover several other essential services, Sarah's next phone call was to Willowbrook Waterworks, a subsidiary of Mountain Peak Energy that she'd acquired 3 years earlier. Hi, Tom. It's Sarah again. I need you to implement Protocol 7 for Willowbrook Water Services as well. The whole subdivision. And Tom, make sure they understand that the water will stay off until all unauthorized construction on my property is removed and the land is restored to its original condition. Within an hour, not only was there no electricity in Willowbrook, there was no water either. The construction crews, already idle without power for their equipment, packed up and left. You can't build a theme park without electricity or water. The homeowners began gathering in the street, looking like refugees from a disaster zone, which, in a way, they were. They'd made the mistake of crossing someone who controlled the basic utilities they needed to survive. Karen tried to take charge of the situation, but the other homeowners weren't having it. "This is all your fault, Karen," shouted Bob Martinez from 1247 Maple Street. "You said this theme park idea was foolproof. How were we supposed to know she owned the power company?" Karen protested. "Maybe because you should have done some basic research before trying to steal someone's property," yelled Patricia Chen from 1255 Maple Street. "My food is spoiling in my refrigerator. My kids can't take baths, all because you wanted to build your stupid theme park." It wasn't stupid. Property values would have. Property values? Karen, our houses are worthless without electricity and water. Who's going to buy a house that can't get basic utilities? The domino effect. But Sarah wasn't done. Her next call was to Mountain Peak Internet Services. "Tom, You know the drill. Protocol 7 for all Willowbrook internet services. Sarah, are you sure about this? That's going to affect the entire neighborhood. Kids won't be able to do online schoolwork. People won't be able to work from home. Tom, these people tried to steal my property and turn it into a theme park. They destroyed my grandmother's rose garden and oak grove. They were planning to demolish my house and pay me $50,000 for a $2 million property. I think they can survive without internet for a few days. The loss of internet was the final straw. The Willowbrook residents, who could still get cell phone service, began calling emergency numbers, complaining about the power outage. But when the utility workers arrived and saw the Mountain Peak Energy trucks, they understood immediately. This wasn't an outage. It was a deliberate disconnection. Sarah's phone started ringing. First it was Karen, begging and pleading. Then it was other HOA board members. Then random neighbors she'd never met. All of them wanted to know what it would take to get their utilities restored. Sarah's answer was simple. Remove every piece of unauthorized construction from my property, restore the land to its original condition, and pay for all damages. And I want it done by Friday. Friday? That's only 3 days away. Then you'd better work fast. Oh, and just so we're clear, every day that passes without complete restoration adds another month to your utility suspension. I'd hate for this to drag on through winter. Colorado winters can be so unforgiving. Without heat, the restoration frenzy. What happened next was like watching a time-lapse video in reverse. The same construction crews who had been building the theme park were now frantically tearing it down. The roller coaster came apart piece by piece. The water slides were dismantled and hauled away. The Ferris wheel was reduced to scrap metal. But it wasn't just about removing the rides. Sarah wanted complete restoration. That meant replacing every plant that had been destroyed, every tree that had been cut down, every square foot of damaged soil. The construction crews worked around the clock, using generators to power their equipment. Since they couldn't get electricity from the grid, the homeowners of Willowbrook took turns bringing them food and water. Desperate to speed up the process, Karen Williamson sold her BMW to help pay for the restoration costs. Bob Martinez took out a second mortgage. Patricia Chen liquidated her retirement account. The entire neighborhood was bleeding money, and it was all going toward undoing the damage they'd caused to Sarah's property. Sarah watched the process from her porch, her house a beacon of normalcy in the chaos. She had electricity, water, internet, and heat. She was comfortable, while her neighbors suffered the consequences of their actions. On Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting, the last piece of theme park equipment was loaded onto a truck and driven away. The construction crews began the delicate process of replanting Sarah's garden with flowers and shrubs that matched her grandmother's original design. The reckoning. Friday morning arrived with Sarah's property looking almost exactly as it had before the theme park invasion. Almost. The new plants were smaller than the originals, and there were still some scars in the soil where heavy machinery had operated. But it was a remarkable transformation from the industrial wasteland it had been just a week earlier. At exactly noon, Sarah called Tom at Mountain Peak Energy. Tom, you can begin the reconnection process for Willowbrook, but I want it done one house at a time, and I want to personally approve each reconnection. One house at a time. Sarah, that's going to take days. That's the point. I want them to understand that their utilities aren't guaranteed. They're privileges that can be revoked when you try to steal someone's property. The first house to get power back was the Martinez house. Bob had been the most vocal about Karen's mistakes and had personally apologized to Sarah. The second was the Chen house. Patricia had organized a meal delivery service for Sarah during the restoration process. Karen Williamson's house was last. Sarah made her wait until Sunday evening, just to drive home the point. When the power finally came back on at the Williamson house, Karen immediately called Sarah. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. We're sorry. We made a mistake." "You made several mistakes, Karen. You tried to steal my property. You destroyed my grandmother's garden. You attempted to force me to sell my home for a fraction of its value. And worst of all, you did it all with a smile on your face, convinced that your money and your HOA position made you untouchable. We'll never bother you again. I promise." "Oh, I know you won't, because if there's ever another incident, if so much as a single construction worker sets foot on my property without permission, I won't just cut off your utilities. I'll make sure Mountain Peak Energy never provides services to this neighborhood again, ever. Do you understand?" Yes, I understand." The new normal life in Willowbrook settled into a new pattern after the great theme park disaster, as the neighbors came to call it. The HOA board was dissolved. Nobody wanted to risk another confrontation with Sarah. Property values actually did increase, but for different reasons than originally planned. The story of how one woman single-handedly defeated an entire HOA spread through social media, attracting buyers who appreciated living near someone who wouldn't tolerate entitled neighbors. Sarah's house became something of a local landmark. Real estate agents would point it out to prospective buyers. "That's where Sarah Patterson lives. She owns Mountain Peak Energy. Don't mess with her property." The theme park equipment was eventually sold at auction, with the proceeds going toward completely restoring Sarah's land. Her new garden was even more beautiful than the original, featuring rare plants and flowers that would have made her grandmother proud. Karen Williamson moved away 6 months later, unable to face the daily reminder of her failed scheme. She sold her house at a loss and relocated to a different state, where she presumably learned to research her neighbors before trying to steal their property. Sarah continued to live quietly in her grandmother's house, but with a newfound reputation as someone not to be crossed. Other HOAs in the region began using the Willowbrook incident as a cautionary tale about the importance of respecting property rights. The final twist. But the story doesn't end there. You see, Sarah had been so impressed by her neighbors' ability to mobilize construction crews and organize complex projects that she decided to offer some of them jobs. The construction foreman who had supervised the theme park removal was hired as Mountain Peak Energy's new facilities manager. Several of the homeowners who had shown genuine remorse were offered discounted utility rates as a gesture of goodwill. And that expensive theme park equipment that had been auctioned off, Sarah quietly purchased it all and donated it to a children's charity, which used it to build a proper theme park in the city, one that was legally permitted, properly zoned, and built on land that was actually owned by the people constructing it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Karen Williamson's illegal theme park scheme ultimately resulted in a real theme park being built for underprivileged children. Sometimes karma works in mysterious ways. Sarah still lives in her grandmother's house, surrounded by her beautiful gardens and her grandmother's century old oak trees. She still runs Mountain Peak Energy, though she's delegated more of the day to day operations to trusted executives. And if you drive through Willowbrook today, you'll notice something interesting. Every house has a small plaque near the front door that reads, Utility Services provided by Mountain Peak Energy, Sarah Patterson, CEO. It's a constant reminder to current and future residents about who really holds the power in the neighborhood. The HOA that tried to steal Sarah's property learned the hard way that you should never mess with someone who controls the electricity, water, and internet for your entire community. Because when the lights go out, all your grand schemes disappear into the darkness. Subscribe for more incredible stories. Did this story blow your mind? Sarah's incredible revenge against the HOA that tried to steal her property is just one of hundreds of amazing tales we share here on HOA Tales. If you enjoyed watching entitled neighbors get their comeuppance, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got new stories every week that will leave you cheering for the underdog. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you loved seeing Karen and her theme park scheme backfire spectacularly. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done if an HOA tried to build a theme park on your property? Would you have been as patient as Sarah, or would you have cut the power on day one? Remember, the best revenge is not always getting mad. Sometimes it's reminding people exactly who has the real power. Sarah proved that you don't need a mansion or a fancy title to win against entitled neighbors. You just need to control the utilities they depend on. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of HOA Tales, where ordinary homeowners fight back against extraordinary entitlement.